Eleanor and the Empty Chair on Thanksgiving. Mrs. Eleanor, 78 years old, lived alone in a modest little house on the outskirts of Ohio. This home had once been filled with laughter and the bustling footsteps of her three sons, Danny, Michael, and Josh. Back then, mornings echoed with the clatter of dishes, the sounds of boys fighting over the bathroom, and evenings were filled with the smell of her roasted meat mingling with laughter that rang through the living room. But now, the house only echoed with the ticking of the clock, the wind howling through the worn-out window frames, and silences that stretched longer with each passing day. Since her husband passed away more than a decade ago, Eleanor had gradually grown accustomed to loneliness, yet she never let go of family traditions. Every Thanksgiving, she would clean the house meticulously, roast the turkey herself, bake a pumpkin pie, and lay out the pristine white tablecloth, just like in the old days. This year, just like every year, she began calling her children early in the week. "Can you make it home this year? I'm still making turkey like always." But the responses were filled with apologetic sighs. "I'm sorry, Mom. Josh has a cold, and it's not a good time to travel." Michael said they're taking a vacation with his wife's family this year. Danny's working the holiday shift at the hospital. He can't swap it. Thanksgiving Day arrived. The weather was cold, the sky gray and heavy just like her mood. The dining table, set for 6, now seated only 1. The dishes were beautifully arranged, every item in its place. Her husband's chair still stood at the head of the table, while the 3 chairs that once belonged to her sons sat empty and still. She poured a glass of red wine, sliced a piece of turkey, and ate slowly. Each bite felt like she was swallowing a whole year of waiting. There were no voices, no hugs, no one to ask how she'd been lately. Only the walls and the old family photos stared quietly back at her. But she didn't cry. Instead, she quietly wrote a few lines in her worn notebook. "One day, maybe my children will understand that the meal I prepare isn't about the food. It's about preserving even a sliver of what our loving family once was." That night, she went to bed early. Outside, snow had just begun to fall, light and silent. And in her sleep, she dreamed of her sons as little boys again, running around the dinner table, calling out, "Mommy," in their clear, innocent voices. She smiled in her dream, the gentle smile of a mother who never stopped loving, even when forgotten. Her husband passed away 12 years ago. Since then, Eleanor had lived in quiet anticipation, waiting for phone calls, waiting for visits from her children and grandchildren. But as they grew up, built their own families, took on their own careers, and the distance between them was no longer just geographical, it was emotional too. At first, the phone calls still came regularly every week. Every time the phone rang, she would rush to wipe her hands, hurry across the room, and answer with a trembling voice full of joy. But gradually, the calls became less frequent. Some weeks, no one called at all. Sometimes, it was just a quick text. "Mom, I'm swamped this week. I'll call you next week." And then the next week slipped by as if the promise had never been made. Eleanor didn't get angry, just quietly saddened. She understood that modern life swept people up in its busy current. But even so, each evening felt a little emptier, especially when she looked out the window and saw the neighbors' kids laughing in the yard, cars pulling into driveways, front doors opening to warm greetings. And her house? Only darkness and the hum of the television playing in the background to ease the silence. Once, she tried calling back Michael, her middle son. He picked up but spoke quickly, distracted. "Mom, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back later." But he never did. The 6-chair table and a Thanksgiving for one. Every year, even though she lived alone, Eleanor held on to the tradition of preparing Thanksgiving dinner just like in the days when her house had been full of laughter. She carefully chose a plump turkey from the corner market she'd gone to for years. She peeled bright red apples, sliced them thin, and mixed them with cinnamon to make the traditional apple pie, the one her youngest, Josh, used to love so much he'd always ask for seconds. She laid a white linen tablecloth across the dining table, smoothing out every wrinkle. She pulled out the fine china passed down through her family, wiping each dish carefully. It was only used once a year on this day. In the center of the table, she placed fresh flowers, usually yellow chrysanthemums, and a sprig of red maple leaves, a gentle nod to the winter approaching. Every detail was meticulously prepared. Not to impress anyone, but to preserve something, a memory, a warmth, a sense of togetherness that once filled her home. A few weeks before the holiday, she handwrote cards to her 3 sons, Danny, Michael, and Josh, with delicate, slightly shaky penmanship. The cards had images of autumn leaves, and inside, a simple note. "This year, I'm still cooking Thanksgiving dinner. If you can make it home, I would be so happy. I miss you all." She followed up the cards with gentle phone calls, her voice calm and familiar. "I'm still making Thanksgiving dinner, like always this year. Will you be able to come home?" But the answers were no different than in previous years. "I'm so sorry, Mom. The kids have a school performance. We really can't miss it. This year, we're planning a vacation in Florida with my in-laws. We already booked the tickets. Michael just started a new job. It's not really a good time to ask for leave, Mom." Eleanor smiled gently and replied softly, "It's okay, I understand. Take care of yourselves, all right?" But after each call ended, a heavy weight settled in her chest, like a stone pressing down. Not because her children were heartless, but because the distance between them had become so familiar, so accepted, that she no longer knew whether she should keep hoping or let go. Eventually, the holiday arrived. The early winter skies in Ohio were gray and overcast, with sharp winds rattling the windows outside. Snow had not yet begun to fall, but the cold had already crept into every corner of the house. In the kitchen, the rich aroma of roast turkey filled the air. The apple pie had just come out of the oven, warm and fragrant. The house felt alive again, at least in spirit. But there was only one person left to witness it. The 6-chair dining table, once the site of childish arguments, clinking glasses, heartfelt toasts, and waves of laughter, now had only one person seated. Eleanor wore the cream-colored sweater her husband had once said looked lovely with her silver hair. She sat down quietly, poured herself a glass of red wine, his favorite, and carefully served a portion of turkey, mashed potatoes, and gravy, as if she were preparing a plate for him. No one knocked at the door. No phone call came in to say Happy Thanksgiving. She simply sat there, chewing slowly, quietly, as though dining with the memories that lingered. She lifted her eyes to the wall in front of her, where old photographs hung, their colors faded with time. A wedding photo of her and her husband. She was young then, with rosy cheeks and soft, voluminous hair. A picture of Michael's first birthday, back when he didn't even know how to blow out candles. And a Christmas photo from 2005, the last time the whole family had been together under one roof. Suddenly, her nose tingled, and her eyes brimmed with tears. A single tear rolled down, landing silently on the napkin in her lap, leaving behind a damp, blurry stain. She didn't cry out of anger. She felt no resentment toward her children. It was simply sadness, the vast and quiet sorrow of someone who had once been the center of a family, now turned into a background character in the very lives she had helped shape. They have their own lives now, she told herself. They're no longer the little boys running around asking for more slices of pie. The people who made her feel like she still belonged in the world were no longer her own children or grandchildren, but rather the distant neighbors around her. The little girl across the street, her name was Lucy, would occasionally bring over some cookies she had just baked. Eleanor always praised them, even when they were a bit undercooked or had burnt edges. The mailman, Mr. Frank, would often pause for a few minutes if he saw her watering the plants, just to ask a few simple questions. "How are you this week, ma'am? It's getting cold. Make sure to stay warm, all right?" Though they weren't close, and though there was no family connection between them, those small interactions helped Eleanor feel something vital, that she still existed. That she was still seen, still asked about, still present in the world. That evening, after clearing the dinner table, she placed the remaining apple pie into the fridge as if still hoping that someone might stop by. Then she reached into the drawer and pulled out her old, worn notebook. Sitting by the warm yellow light of her table lamp, she wrote a single short line. "When you grow old, the most frightening thing isn't illness, it's being forgotten." She closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and slowly climbed the stairs to bed. But before she retired for the night, she glanced once more at the dining table, the place where one chair remained empty across from hers, and 3 others sat still, long untouched. Then, one day, while sweeping the backyard, she found a flyer that had blown in from the local community center. Printed in bold letters across the top were the words, "Golden Years Club, a place to meet, share, and rediscover the meaning of life." She hesitated for a few days. She had never been fond of socializing with strangers, but on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, with the soft sunlight casting a gentle glow across her garden, she decided to give it a try. The wooden doors opened, and she was welcomed by a smiling, middle-aged woman named Linda. "Hello there. Are you new? Come on in with us. Today we have a watercolor painting class." For the first time in many years, Eleanor felt like she belonged somewhere. No one asked how many grandchildren she had. No one spoke of age as something to pity. Instead, they asked her what she wanted to paint, what kind of cake she liked, and whether she'd be interested in joining the Thursday book club. She started coming to the club every week. She learned how to cook Indian food, tried her hand at pottery, and even gave slow dancing a try during one of their small evening socials. She became friends with Mr. Harold, a quiet old man with a voice full of charm and the gift of storytelling. Every time they had tea together, he would always say the same thing, firmly and kindly. "We're never too old to begin again, Eleanor." And he was right. Eleanor gradually found herself smiling more, sleeping better, and no longer waiting for something that might never come from children who had no more time to spare. She found herself again not as the forgotten mother in an empty house, but as a woman still full of worth, still full of warmth, and capable of writing the next chapter of her life in her own way, without needing anyone's permission. Older adults who have been forgotten can still write the next chapter of their lives in their own way without needing anyone's permission. Even if their hair has turned silver and their steps have slowed, their hearts still know how to feel, how to hope, and how to love. No one has the right to define someone's worth by their age or by how many times they've been left behind. Because true value lies in choice, the choice to stop waiting, the choice to stand up, and the choice to live on for themselves. They can begin learning something new from painting, experimenting with unfamiliar recipes, writing their memoirs, to simply planting a small row of flowers in front of the porch. Every small act is a quiet declaration. I'm still here. I can still begin. Loneliness is not a sentence. Sometimes it is a doorway to a new journey, a journey back to oneself. Older people don't need to be rescued. They need to be seen, to be heard, and to be respected. And even if the world forgets them, they can still remember themselves. Eleanor, or anyone like her, no longer needs to be the forgotten mother or the grandmother left behind. They can become the main character in an inspiring final chapter of their own life. A new chapter, no longer written by the expectations of others, but by their own voice, their lived experiences, and their quiet courage. And sometimes, it is from the quietest corners that the most beautiful things begin.